Hideyoshi Okoye was living his normal virgin life when one day a busty maid unexpectedly appeared at his door claiming to be an assassin looking for a job. As she approached the Okoye residence, Hideyoshi was still asleep in his messy room, oblivious to the world. However, the doorbell woke him up and sluggishly he made his way downstairs, checking the entry camera to see who it was. Outside stood a beautiful woman, apologizing for the intrusion and expressing her desire to be hired as the household's maid. Still half asleep, Hideyoshi invited her in, apologizing for the untidy state of his home and explaining that his parents were away. As he made his way to the kitchen to grab a drink, it suddenly dawned on him that he had just let a complete stranger into his house without thinking. Growing suspicious, he tried to maintain a polite demeanor while keeping a close eye on her, wondering if she was trying to sell something or involved in something shady. To buy time, he asked if she had experience working as a maid. The woman responded that she had, but her previous jobs were a bit different. She explained that she used to execute traitors who had betrayed her former employer, and she was recommended for this maid position by that very same employer. Hideyoshi was taken aback, unsure whether she was joking, but something told him she wasn't. Fear began to creep over him, and he realized that getting her out of the house was now a priority. He asked if she had any connection to his family, and she explained that he was the grandson of the second son of the cousin of the wife of the heir to her former employer. Hideyoshi blurted out that he was practically a stranger to this employer, but quickly tried to correct himself to avoid offending her. In an attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere, he asked what kind of executions she specialized in. Without hesitation, she took him outside and demonstrated her skills by throwing sharp projectiles at a nearby tree. Hideyoshi quickly made it clear that he had no intention of hiring her and anyone, and besides, he didn't even know the employer she spoke of. He firmly declined her services. The maid seemed to understand, apologized for the intrusion, and left without further trouble. Hideyoshi, still in shock, wondered if it had all been a strange dream. But then he noticed something in the grass. A small bell had fallen off her tiara. Meanwhile, the maid, having expected this outcome, pondered where she should go next as she waited for the subway. Just as she prepared to leave, Hideyoshi came running toward her, holding the bell. Distracted by his urgency, he didn't notice Truck-kun speeding toward him. In a flash, the maid yanked him out of the way, saving his life. The truck driver cursed at Hideyoshi for his carelessness and drove off. The maid, still shaken by the adrenaline, admitted she had never saved anyone before and that her heart was racing. Hideyoshi handed her the bell, thanking her, and they said their goodbyes. However, just as they were about to part ways, Hideyoshi changed his mind. He blurted out that he actually was looking for a maid and she could work at his house after all. They returned to the Okoye residence, where the maid spread an array of blades on the table, explaining that knives were likely humanity's first tools and, though simple, could be deadly in the right hands. Hideyoshi interrupted, stating that what he needed was help cleaning, not with weapons. The maid, thinking this was some sort of code, asked who needed to be cleaned up. Hideyoshi pointed at the bags of trash in his room, hoping it would be self-explanatory. She, however, misinterpreted, thinking someone was stuffed inside one of the bags. Exasperated, Hideyoshi clarified that he needed help with actual cleaning, like sweeping and mopping the floors. The maid asked if she'd be hired if she did the job, and once that was settled, it became apparent that she had no idea how to use a mop or bucket. What followed was a series of calamities. She spilled water everywhere, slipped, and ended up with a bucket stuck on her head. Hideyoshi, seeing the disaster unfold, removed the bucket from her head and apologized, saying it was his fault for asking her to do something she wasn't used to. He then offered to help her clean together. By late afternoon, the house was spotless, and the two shared a moment of relief. Hideyoshi thanked the maid, who looked awkward, clearly not used to receiving praise. He realized it was getting late and neither of them had eaten, having been so focused on cleaning. He asked if she could cook, but her silence answered that question. Reassuring her, he told her he had the perfect meal in mind and suggested she take a bath while he prepared it. In the bathroom, the maid reflected on how strange it felt to be thanked for her work. Meanwhile, Hideyoshi, back in the living room, pondered the oddity of his summer vacation. With his parents away, he had somehow ended up with an assassin maid who couldn't clean or cook, but he was also concerned about another possibility. What if she walked out of the bathroom wearing just a towel? However, when she emerged from the bathroom, she was fully dressed, shattering his expectations. She promptly began chopping cabbage for dinner, one thing she was skilled at. She had always eaten simply to survive, never for taste or presentation. Hideyoshi, moved by her admission, assured her that the tonkatsu was special. It came from the Katsuda couple, who had been making the best food in the region for over 60 years, all at a very reasonable price. There were even rumors that famous people would disguise themselves just to get a taste of the legendary tonkatsu. Despite Hideyoshi's convincing pitch, the maid remained unimpressed, showing little to no excitement, which left him feeling slightly frustrated. But, accepting that this was just her way, he decided to let the food speak for itself. Seizing the moment, Hitoyoshi asked for her name. She responded that she didn't have one, explaining that her employers had always called her whatever they wished, so he was free to do the same. Not particularly skilled at coming up with names, Hitoyoshi decided to stick with calling her maid. Though she had never cared about what people called her before, for some reason, this time felt different. When they finally began eating, Hitoyoshi eagerly waited for her reaction. After taking a bite, the maid mused that, as usual, she couldn't tell if the food was good or bad, as taste wasn't something she paid attention to. However, she did note that the food was warm and pleasant, a feeling that echoed her experience with the bath earlier. Inwardly, she reflected that the warmth of the food and bath was much like the warmth she felt from the person sitting across from her. Hitoyoshi then pointed out where she'd be staying and assured her that everything was set up. The maid was surprised to hear that he had prepared a room just for her, and it triggered a memory from her past. She recalled a man who had once told her she had passed a test, praising her for her cold, white skin and icy heart. On that day, he had also given her a name, but she now preferred to have none, which was better than being called the cold woman. Her thoughts were interrupted when Hitoyoshi passed her the tonkatsu sauce, explaining that the dish wasn't the same without it. Without hesitation, she poured the sauce over her meal and took another bite. This time, the taste overwhelmed her and she couldn't help but express her delight, a rare break in her normally stoic demeanor. Later that night, around 3 a.m., Hitoyoshi woke up drenched in sweat after a nightmare he hadn't had in years. Feeling a sudden hunger, he decided to go downstairs to grab some instant ramen. But as he descended the stairs, he heard an odd noise coming from the kitchen. Startled, he remembered that the maid had mentioned being a professional assassin. Despite his fear, he mustered the courage to check. Peeking into the kitchen, he saw the maid with a red stain on her face. For a moment, he thought it was blood, but as she turned, he realized it was just tonkatsu sauce. Caught red-handed, the maid apologized profusely. Relieved that it wasn't anything serious, Hitoyoshi didn't scold her. Not wanting her to limit her experience to just the tonkatsu, Hitoyoshi whipped up an impromptu fondue with the sauce since there wasn't much else to make it fancy. But all the maid really wanted was more of the sauce, and that's exactly what she indulged in. After the meal, she asked if Hitoyoshi had a nightmare, having overheard him moaning in his room. Worried he might be dangerous like her, she admitted to entering his room and found him calling out for his mother repeatedly. The maid also shared that she had a dream of her own, where she spoke to the tonkatsu sauce, which claimed it was endless and no matter how much she tried, it would never run out. At least it was a change from her usual bad dreams. She felt sympathy for Hitoyoshi, knowing all too well what it was like to suffer from disturbing dreams. Hitoyoshi brushed it off, saying it was just a recurring dream he had from time to time. He explained that as a child, he could only sleep when resting on his mother's lap, especially after such nightmares. Moved by his words, the maid offered him her lap to rest on, sensing it might bring him comfort. As Hitoyoshi lay his head on her lap, her thoughts drifted back to the man who had always told her she was born to kill, a shadow that often hung over her. But in that moment, as the boy rested on her lap, the weight of that darkness seemed to lift, if only slightly. The situation felt awkward for both of them, but neither backed out. They stayed that way, seeing it through until the end. She then questioned why her heart had raced when she saved Hitoyoshi, unlike the times when she had sent others to their deaths. She couldn't understand why her body had moved instinctively to protect him. The next morning, she slashed through the trash before bagging it. When Hitoyoshi asked why, she explained it was to save space, which impressed him. Suddenly, they discovered a small dog abandoned in front of the house, accompanied by a note from a broke man, mistaking Hitoyoshi for someone wealthy, thinking he would take care of it. Though reluctant, Hitoyoshi didn't want the dog to end up an orphan like you. However, the maid, following her master's teachings, thought differently. She pointed out that saving the dog out of sympathy would weaken its natural survival instincts. She asked if Hitoyoshi was ready to take responsibility for the dog, but he brushed off her concerns, stating that just as she had saved him, he was saving the dog, not out of sympathy but instinct. His words stirred something in her, and when he mentioned how he, too, knew the feeling of abandonment, she was moved. He took the dog in, quickly becoming attached to it, while the maid kept her distance, treating the dog like a plague. Hitoyoshi tried to encourage her to pet the dog, but she slid away and he realized that she was actually afraid of dogs. Embarrassed, the maid began shaking, which Hitoyoshi found endearing. She explained that during her assassin training, she had been left alone in the mountains with wild, vicious dogs. Understanding her trauma, Hitoyoshi acknowledged it was unfortunate that she couldn't help with the dog, but his words made the maid feel disappointed in herself. Determined, the maid asked to hold the dog, but when she finally did, her fear made her tremble. Hitoroyoshi asked what specifically scared her, and she pointed to its claws, teeth, and eyes, which she found terrifying. Hitoroyoshi, on the other hand, joked that the dog looked more like a mochi to him, a concept the maid didn't quite understand. Suddenly, the puppy nibbled her finger, causing her to panic and almost throw the dog. After calming down, they noticed the dog nibbling on Hitoriyoshi's hand as well. Upon checking its teeth, they realized it was teething and decided to take it to the vet. While at the animal hospital, the maid impressed Hitoroyoshi by going out to buy dog supplies. On a walk later that day, the maid opened up to Hitoroyoshi, admitting she had never met someone as kind as him. Her previous masters had been cold and unforgiving, only caring about her completing tasks and tolerating no failures. Hitoroyoshi, by contrast, was gentle with her despite her many mistakes. She expressed her desire to stay by his side, in a world so different from her past, filled with warmth instead of the cold world of survival through assassination. After hearing her out, Hitoroyoshi gently pointed out that what she truly wanted was to leave her life as an assassin behind and become an ordinary girl, something she had never considered before. Until now, all she had known was ending people, but with her new master, she found hope. Hitoroyoshi confessed that at first he had been afraid of her, but now he saw her as a good kid. Hearing that made the maid think of her past, and she asked Hitoroyoshi to help her learn how to be a normal girl. Though he doesn't know much about girly things, Hitoroyoshi encourages her to learn how to accept mistakes and not be too hard on herself. The next morning, the maid is practicing how to cut cabbage, determined to make okonomiyaki, wanting to pair it with her favorite sauce. Suddenly, the dog appears out of nowhere by her legs, startling her. She's surprised that a normal dog could sneak up on her, an assassin. But when the dog's stomach growls, she realizes it's hungry and feeds it some food. While the dog is eating, she tentatively reaches out to pet it, but stops when Hitoroyoshi enters. He starts gently stroking the fluffy dog, and after feeling its round belly, he decides to name it Mochi. He praises the maid for feeding the dog and for chopping the cabbage, giving her a twirl in celebration. This makes her cling to him, slightly embarrassed yet pleased. Mochi, full of energy, starts playfully humping and pegging for attention, but Hitoroyoshi explains that he can't play right now since he needs to prepare dinner. The maid steps up, offering to play with Mochi, saying she wants to prove she can be a normal girl who believes in what Hitoroyoshi says. Hearing this, Hitoroyoshi tells her that he believes in her too, boosting her confidence. With newfound determination, she starts petting the dog, and with every touch, she feels herself warming up to it. Eventually, she's giving Mochi belly rubs and touching its paws. She realizes that just as Hitoroyoshi had grown to trust her, she was beginning to trust the dog. At dinner, after tasting the saucy okonomiyaki, she lets out an involuntary happy sound. When Hitoroyoshi offers her another serving, she tries to decline, but her excited body language betrays her true feelings. Sensing her hesitation, Hitoroyoshi reassures her that it's okay to ask for something if she wants it. Taking this opportunity, she nervously asks him for a name of her own. Hitoroyoshi ponders for a moment, asking her about her birth date. While she doesn't know the exact day, she recalls it being during the winter. With that in mind, Hitoroyoshi comes up with the name Yuki, meaning snow. The name reminds her of her old master, who called her cold-blooded, but Hitoroyoshi sees snow differently. To him, snow is beautiful, like a blanket that protects seeds from the cold, allowing them to bloom into vibrant flowers. Hearing his comforting words and seeing his gentle expression, Yuki starts to understand that life with Hitoroyoshi is warmer and more beautiful than anything she's ever known. She realizes that as long as she stays by his side, she might one day learn what it's like to live a normal life. With deep gratitude, Yuki thanks Hitoroyoshi for giving her a name, her smile breaking through shyly. Seeing her genuine smile for the first time, Hitoroyoshi feels a wave of happiness, glad that she's finally able to express herself freely. One day, as Yuki plays with Mochi, Hitoroyoshi drops by with a favorite ask. When she asks what it is, he confesses he wants to get his ear pierced, and he's hoping Yuki, who already has piercings, can help him poke a hole in his ear. She agrees, but as soon as she brings the blade close, she hesitates, pulling back at the thought of hurting her own master. Just then, the doorbell rings. When Yuki answers it, she finds a girl standing there, asking for her brother. Yuki realizes this is Hitoriyoshi's younger sister, Riko, who bursts in excitedly. Once inside, Riko teases her brother, surprised that her loser virgin brother could hire a maid as attractive as Yuki. She demands to know why he never mentioned this at family gatherings. But Hitoroyoshi awkwardly explains that he was worried their mother would freak out, and although their dad approved of him getting a maid, he had no idea she was so striking. Riko isn't buying it and berates him for hiding the truth. Curious, Yuki asks why the siblings live separately, but Riko ignores the question and instead gushes over Yuki's beauty, which Hitoroyoshi explains is because Riko adores beautiful people and has no tolerance for ugly men like her brother. Riko quickly turns her attention to Yuki's backstory and learns that Hitoyoshi was the one who gave Yuki her name. Shocked, Riko watches as Yuki starts telling her origin story, explaining how she was once a nameless assassin until Hitoyoshi named her. Riko has a brief moment of disbelief, but then enthusiastically asks Yuki to autograph her notebook. Yuki obliges, but her signature ends up looking more like squiggly worms than letters. She defends herself, explaining that while she can speak 12 languages thanks to her assassin days, she's never actually studied calligraphy. Riko is unfazed and gets the idea to make Yuki her summer research project. Hitoyoshi objects, but Riko insists that Yuki is perfect for her project, wanting to show her assassin side. Despite his protests, she reassures him that she'll make it seem like Yuki is just a regular maid with a mysterious aura. They head to the backyard where Yuki demonstrates her skills by throwing a blade straight at an apple placed on Riko's head, narrowly avoiding giving Hitoyoshi a heart attack. Riko, fascinated, asks how many knives Yuki carries and where she hides them. Yuki reveals she has 5, but as she's about to show the one strapped to her thigh, Hitoyoshi quickly intervenes, stopping her from letting Yuguners from seeing her treasure. Later, as Riko bombards Yuki with more random questions, her stomach growls. When she asks if Yuki has a special dish, Yuki responds by chopping up a pile of cabbages with impressive skill and serves them plain on a plate, much to Riko's delight. They decide to head to McDonald's afterward, and there they notice a poster for a fireworks festival. Hitoyoshi mentions that the festival is famous for its tonkatsu sauce, which immediately gets Yuki's attention, so they decide to check it out. At the festival, Riko eagerly drags Yuki to a shooting game booth. Despite her enthusiasm, Riko struggles and misses every shot. Yuki takes her turn with confidence but misses as well, admitting that shooting has never been her strong suit. They move on to a goldfish catching game, where Yuki channels her inner focus, managing to scoop up plenty of fish. Impressed, Riko asks Yuki to teach her, and Yuki patiently shares her technique. The game attendant, observing Yuki's helpfulness, compliments her as a good sister. Afterward, they buy the good stuff, which Yuki has been excited to try. The taste is so delicious it nearly overwhelms her, and she devours it like how I devoured your mom last night. The clerk, amused by her reaction, gives her extra for free, which leaves her temporarily speechless. Riko then heads off to buy some drinks. Hitoyoshi tries to follow, but Riko assures him she'll be fine on her own. While waiting, Hitoyoshi asks Yuki if she has any festival memories. But Yuki recounts a mission from her assassin days where instead of enjoying herself, she had to eliminate a target during a festival, stabbing him in the back as they watched fireworks together. Hitoyoshi is left speechless. But before he can respond, the fireworks begin. Yuki gazes at them in awe, captivated by their beauty. Riko then returns with drinks, declaring that summer festivals are the best, and Yuki smiles in agreement. On their way home, Riko jokingly scolds Yuki for eating so much sauce, warning her that she might get as big as your mom. Suddenly, they hear someone shout about a robbery, and a motorbike whizzes by, nearly hitting Yuki. Acting swiftly, Yuki pulls Riko out of harm's way, and Riko, flustered, reacts to being saved like a princess. Hitoyoshi, however, is annoyed at the spilled sauce, muttering that the robber deserves to meet his fate. Yuki takes his words literally and charges off after the thief. Seeing her in action, Riko follows along, eager to witness Yuki take action. As Yuki leaps across rooftops, Riko and Hitoyoshi chase her, eventually taking a shortcut to catch up. Where they finally spot the thief, Yuki gracefully throws a knife at his tires, stopping him in his tracks. As she approaches him with a fierce look, Hitoyoshi quickly shouts for her to stop. She obliges, flicking the robber's helmet as a minor punishment before announcing that she's hungry again. Laughing, they decide to buy more sauce and leave the robber, who is now so shaken he willingly turns himself in. After grabbing some extra food, they head home, and Riko excitedly talks about showcasing her summer project featuring Yuki to her class. This confuses Yuki, who then asks what school is. Riko explains it as an amazing place for learning, but is interrupted by a text from her mom saying she's made beef stew. Riko rushes off, and Yuki, noticing her eagerness, finds it endearing. The next day, Yuki tells Hitoyoshi she wants to experience school for herself. That morning at school, Hitoyoshi arrives, wondering if Yuki will be alright. His friends approach, chattering about a rumor of a busty big gyat made in town, causing Hitoyoshi to spit out his drink in shock. He tries to brush it off, but then the teacher introduces a new student, Yuki, stepping into the classroom with confidence, much to his surprise. Yuki then introduces herself as Hitoyoshi's cousin in front of the class, but when she sits down, she unexpectedly calls him master, shocking everyone around. Later, after school, Riko appears and casually asks Hitoyoshi how his day went. Stone-faced, he quickly deduces that Riko is behind this setup, and she enthusiastically celebrates her plan's success. On the way home, Riko talks up Yuki's skills, mentioning that before Yuki even enrolled, she mastered everything she needed to know about school in just 3 days. Hitoriyoshi, still baffled, asks how Yuki suddenly became his cousin, conveniently in his class in school without him knowing. Riko explains that Yuki has a connection from her previous job as an assassin, which helped her get registered in the same class as him. Riko then suggested that Yuki pose as his cousin to make it easier to explain their interactions going forward. However, it was Riko's idea to keep this a secret, just to see Hitoriyoshi's reaction. Hitoriyoshi playfully smacks Riko on the head, but Yuki, concerned, asks if she's done something wrong. He quickly softens, reassuring her that he doesn't mind and hopes they can both enjoy their school life together. The next day, students rush out of class eager to grab some popular Katsuta bread from the cafeteria, which catches Yuki's interest. When Hitoriyoshi asks what she'd like for lunch, she replies that she wants the Katsuta bread they've been talking about. However, he explains that it's rarer than your father coming home, and that she'll need to be quick to get one during lunch. He even draws her a map showing how their classroom is the farthest from the cafeteria. While he feels uncertain about her chances, Yuki is determined, declaring that if the others can get the bread, she can too. Full of conviction, she dashes out, even leaping out of a window to the roof. Initially, Hitoriyoshi tries to stop her, but she fearlessly sprints across the railing, showing the fierce look of someone in pursuit of food. Realizing there's no stopping her, Hitoriyoshi watches anxiously, fearing she might expose her abilities in front of the crowd. Just as Yuki is about to jump down, she changes course and swings herself down perfectly in front of the cafeteria, snapping one bread and a sandwich. Fearfully, she then tells Hitoriyoshi that due to the high demand, she could only buy one of each. But he reveals that he's had the Katsuta bread before, insisting she enjoy her hard-earned bread. Yuki, touched, hesitates but finally takes a bite, squealing with joy at the taste. Moved by her happiness, she even shares her sandwich with him, shoving the big glizzy down his throat. That evening, Riko announces she's staying over despite Hitoriyoshi's resistance. She teases him, mentioning that he gets to live with Yuki and could clap her anytime. Riko then shares that she always wanted a sister to talk about boys with and has even imagined her brother clapping Yuki in her daydreams. Suddenly, she has a grand idea. If Hitoriyoshi were to marry Yuki, her wish would come true. Riko is convinced Yuki likes him, but Hitoriyoshi insists Yuki doesn't feel romantic emotions. He even recalls a time recently when she didn't react at all when shoving a glizzy down his throat. Still, Riko is undeterred, speculating that their father would be supportive but their mother less so. Just then, Yuki joins in and asks, confused, who's getting married. Riko reveals everything and directly asks Yuki if she likes Hitoriyoshi. Yuki replies that she admires him, which leaves Hitoriyoshi momentarily flustered. Later, as they hang out, Riko asks Yuki if she wears makeup, admiring her natural beauty. Yuki responds that she doesn't wear any makeup, prompting Riko to compliment her, saying that her face is the envy of many girls. Yuki, however, admits that her looks didn't serve any purpose in her former line of work. Riko, feeling self-conscious, remarks that she herself doesn't have a particularly pretty face, but Yuki reassures her by saying she genuinely likes how Riko looks. This surprises and warms Riko, who has never heard such praise from anyone besides her parents. She asks if she could ever look as beautiful as Yuki, and Yuki tells her that since she started eating tonkatsu sauce, her skin has been glowing. She then offers Riko some of her tonkatsu glazed melon, which initially confuses her, but she eventually enjoys it. Observing their interaction, Hitoriyoshi thinks that they already seem like sisters and credits Riko for helping Yuki adjust to normal life so quickly. Noticing his expression, Riko teases him, suggesting he must be imagining marrying Yuki so he can watch scenes like this every day. Hitoriyoshi tries to deny it, but when Riko asks if he would be happy with someone as charming as Yuki, he eventually agrees, making her smile. Meanwhile, the mysterious cat watches them from the bushes. The next day in class, the teacher is giving a lesson on how to cook the good stuff from Breaking Bad. However, he spots Hitoriyoshi dozing off and tosses a piece of chalk his way. Without anyone noticing, Yuki slices the chalk mid-air, but in the process, accidentally blinds Hitoriyoshi. Concerned, he heads to the infirmary, where he meets a beautiful, busty, big-gagged health teacher, Nida, a striking woman whose appearance seems right out of an anime. After he explains his eye issue, she directs him to sit on the bed, and he's immediately on edge due to the strange vibe he senses. Nida then begins questioning him about Yuki, and when he mentions that Yuki is his cousin, she laughs, saying he doesn't look related to someone as gorgeous as Yuki. While examining him, she suddenly compliments his looks, calling him handsome, and locks the door, and her demeanor shifts. She leans in closer, playfully pushing him onto the bed and teasing him. But just as she's about to cross the line, Yuki bursts in, locking eyes with Nida in a fierce stare. Hitoriyoshi, startled, scrambles over to Yuki for protection, but Nida brushes it off as a joke, saying he just looked cute like a hamster under pressure. Ignoring Nida's attempts to lure him back, Yuki firmly pulls Hitoyoshi out of the room and instructs him to stay away from Nida. Remembering Riko's words, Hitoyoshi wonders if Yuki might actually have feelings for him and be feeling a bit jealous. Frustrated, Nida dismisses them, saying his condition isn't serious. As Yuki escorts Hitoyoshi away, she quietly apologizes for her behavior and says she has something important to tell him, causing his heart to race. But instead of a confession, Yuki reveals that Nida is also an assassin, leaving him stunned. Meanwhile, in the infirmary, the lurking cat approaches Nida. The cat, it turns out, is delivering photographs of Hitayoshi's home, which Nida begins plotting to destroy. Nida has always dreamed of one day settling down on a beach surrounded by tough-fit men, but before she can fulfill that wish, she must eliminate both Hitoyoshi and Yuki. Meanwhile, Hitoyoshi struggles to sleep as Yuki refuses to leave his side, worried that Nida, an unknown threat to them, might bang him at any moment. Hitoyoshi tells her he can't relax with her hovering so close if Yuki comes up with an idea. She then lies down beside him, suggesting that her thighs could help him relax, a dream scenario for most men. Embarrassed, he admits he's more concerned about her safety, which makes her blush, but Yuki assures him she can defend herself even in her sleep. Yuki suspects that Nida might hold a grudge from her past. To comfort Hitoyoshi, she holds his hand, promising to protect the person who taught her what warmth feels like. Hitoyoshi, feeling a bit warm himself from their hand-holding, gets up to open the window, but Yuki stops him, cautioning that he could easily get ambushed through it. Just then, she notices the smell of savory tonkatsu sauce, only to realize too late that it's a trap. Nida has already infiltrated their space and taken Hitoyoshi hostage, ready to do biological lessons with him. She then addresses Yuki by her true name, the White Wolf of the Dragon's 9 offsprings, and criticizes her for falling for such a simple trick. Yuki draws her knife, but Nida warns her that if she acts recklessly, she'll start by harming Hitoyoshi's eye. Yuki responds in Mandarin, threatening to feed Nida and her family to the dogs if she harms him, and this surprisingly unsettles Nida. Deciding to resolve things once and for all, Nida tells Yuki she'll be waiting at school for their duel, while she takes Hitoyoshi as her captive. After they leave, Yuki recalls her old master's words, that she is nothing more than a cold assassin with no hope for a happy ending. Yet determined to accept who she is, she steels herself to save Hitoyoshi at any cost, even if it means abandoning her peaceful life and returning to the shadows. Deep down, though, she longs for the warmth that Hitoyoshi has brought into her life. Meanwhile, Nida has tied up Hitoyoshi and, noticing his calmness, asks if he feels any resentment toward Yuki for getting him involved. Hitoyoshi admits that, though he's scared, he trusts Yuki, who promised to protect him. Curious about his lack of knowledge, he asks Nida about Ksu, a name she's mentioned before. Nida is surprised that Hitoyoshi doesn't know Yuki's background despite their close relationship. She reveals that Ksu, also known as the White Wolf, is a formidable assassin, one of the elite members of the Dragon's 9 offsprings, a group responsible for influencing some of history's most significant events. Nida realizes that killing Ksu, also known as Yuki, would skyrocket her own reputation, which is precisely her goal. But Hitoyoshi doubts her claims, insisting that the Yuki he knows is a sweet girl with a big heart and melons who loves life's little joys and squeals with happiness. Nida scoffs, admitting she's just as shocked to see what the once mighty Ksu has become under Hitoyoshi's influence. But the mention of them discussing marriage even made Nida so angry she joked about nuking their house. However, there's something about Hitoyoshi's calmness that intrigues her. She realizes he has an unusual power to soften Yuki's dark, cold heart. Nida believes that love weakens people, so with Hitoyoshi in the mix, she feels confident she'll be able to send Yuki to the afterlife to meet your dad. Just then, Yuki arrives, ready for a fight. Nida fires at her, but Yuki slices through the bullets effortlessly. Smirking, Nida reveals she's planted a landmine beneath Yuki, which she detonates thinking she's won. But in an instant, Yuki appears again, nearly taking Nida's head off. Hitoyoshi's presence visibly calms Yuki, as she reassures him that she'll save him. Frustrated by Yuki's dismissive attitude, Nida taunts her, mentioning her past and threatening that she could ruin Yuki's chance at a peaceful life with Hitoyoshi. But Yuki tells Nida to keep quiet, as her only concern is that Hitoyoshi has school tomorrow and needs his rest. Enraged, Nida demands to know why Yuki can't talk about anything other than Hitoyoshi. Yuki begins chatting about her favorite things: friends, snacks, sauces, causing Nida's patience to snap. She reveals her hidden weapons, all aim at Hitoyoshi, threatening to shoot if he struggles. Yuki finally decides she's had enough and charges at Nida. As the guns fire, Yuki expertly throws a knife into the air and deflects each bullet with her smaller blades, protecting Hitoyoshi. Nida tries to activate her backup plan, but Yuki's thrown knife hits Nida's phone, destroying her setup. As Yuki closes in, Nida has a flash of memory of who Sue really is. Desperate, Nida points a gun at Hitoriyoshi, but Yuki intercepts and kicks her down. Nida snarls, taunting Yuki that she'll always be Sue, the deadly assassin, and that no assassin can live a normal life. Yuki agrees that her old self had nothing but violence and death, but she tells Nida she won't take lives anymore or let anyone die because of her. For the sake of her future, Yuki intends to fight for a normal life. Nida, astonished, realizes that Yuki has changed. She's no longer just a killer, but a girl determined to protect what matters most. Nida smiles and laughs, finally understanding that she never had a chance against Yuki's resolve. On their way home, Yuki apologizes to Hitoriyoshi for dragging him into danger and offers to leave if that's what he wants. Instead, Hitoriyoshi takes her hand and with a gentle smile, asks her to teach him self-defense so he can protect her too. Blushing, Yuki realizes that he wants her by his side and she happily agrees. Days later, Yuki shines on the volleyball court like a pro athlete, her skills leaving everyone in awe. The boys, unable to believe a loser like Hitoriyoshi could be related to someone so talented. Hitoriyoshi, however, is too distracted by his lingering thoughts about Nida, a school doctor who revealed Yuki's secret as one of the dragon's 9 offspring. This revelation has only deepened his curiosity about her. During the game, Yuki briefly smiles at him, making the boys erupt with jealousy, but the moment is interrupted when a stray ball hurtles toward Hitoriyoshi. He's saved by none other than Nida, now going by her real name, Grace. To make things even more confusing, Grace is now posing as a PE teacher and claims to be Hitoriyoshi's cousin. The story flashes back to weeks earlier, when Grace first revealed her true identity as an assassin specializing in intelligence, unlike Yuki, who is adept with knives. Grace explained her interest in staying near them. She's fascinated by the idea of the legendary assassin Sue being tethered to someone as seemingly ordinary as Hitoriyoshi. To ensure her stay, Grace proposed a deal: unlimited Katsuda sauce bread for 3 months in exchange for her presence being tolerated. While Hitoriyoshi tried to decode what he thought was assassin jargon, Yuki casually accepted, knowing there was no hidden meaning, only the promise of delicious bread. Despite Hitoriyoshi's worries, Yuki reassured him that Grace had no reason to harm them and vowed to protect him no matter what. However, her drooling betrayed her true motivation: the bread. Back in the present, Grace abandons her role as an observer, choosing instead to openly tease Hitoriyoshi, much to Yuki's annoyance. Her playful antics provoke Yuki into serving the volleyball with such force that it nearly destroys the wall. Instead of being reprimanded, Yuki becomes the center of admiration as her peers gush over her powerful serve. Later, at lunch, Yuki admits to Hitoriyoshi that she feels embarrassed by her actions. When he presses her about it, she confesses that seeing him close to another assassin made her feel alienated. Recognizing her jealousy, Hitoriyoshi reassures her that her emotions are perfectly natural, which lifts her spirits. Over the weekend, Yuki starts her day by proudly doing laundry in her maid outfit. After weeks of struggling and repeated failures, she finally nails the process, leaving her feeling like a triumphant parent admiring their child. Hitoriyoshi, seeing her joy, feels a sense of pride too. When dinner time arrives, they find they only have cabbage. While Yuki dreams of pairing the cabbage with katsuda sauce, Hitoriyoshi surprises her by buying pork katsu from his favorite vendor. Yuki is ecstatic, overwhelmed by the sheer sight of so much katsuda sauce. During their meal, Yuki asks Hitoriyoshi if he's ever felt the same excitement she feels for katsuda sauce. He reminisces about his childhood visits to the Hero Theater, where he was mesmerized by Walmart Cam and Ryder's performances. Yuki finds his story oddly relatable. Watching the elderly vendor expertly prepare the cutlet, Yuki marvels at his skill, even joking that he might secretly be a samurai. The vendor's wife casually mentions that they invented katsuda sauce, and Yuki immediately elevates them to godlike status, thanking them profusely for their culinary contribution. Thanks to the couple's katsuda sauce, Yuki, who had never truly enjoyed food before, now experiences it on a profound level. Smiling warmly, she thanks them wholeheartedly for bringing happiness into her life. The grandma, touched by her gratitude, explains that the reason Yuki enjoys the sauce so much is because it carries the warmth of happiness. Yuki reflects on this sentiment, realizing that what she truly feels is the warmth she associates with Hitoriyoshi. She agrees with the grandma's words, lost in thought when suddenly the grandpa appears behind her and brushes dust off her shoulder. Startled by how effortlessly this old man snuck up on her, Yuki is nonetheless impressed. Instead of fear, she feels amazement, convinced this old prune must be a retired samurai turned pork cutlet vendor. The grandma interrupts Yuki's musings by offering her a taste of a new sauce recipe. Like a cat eager for fish, Yuki leaps at the chance to try it. With one spoonful, she's transported to heaven, overwhelmed by its perfection. Later that night, after they've finished their dinner, Hitoyoshi finds himself conflicted. He still yearns to know more about the dragon's 9 offspring, but feels he shouldn't pursue it after seeing how content Yuki is in her new life. He realizes that Yuki's past is hers to share, and while he wants to ask, he knows it could bring her pain he understands all too well. As he drifts off to sleep, he dreams of his mother, who had left him. Despite his longing to hug her one last time, she never returned his embrace. Waking up in tears, he finds himself humming Yuki. Yuki, noticing his distress, gently explains that she caught him sleepwalking. Flustered, Hitoyoshi accidentally slips and bumps into her, quickly apologizing. Realizing Hitoyoshi had another dream about his mother, Yuki invites him to rest on her lap again, offering comfort. Just then, Hitoyoshi's phone falls, and when Yuki picks it up, she notices he's been researching her past. Taking a deep breath, Yuki confesses that she doesn't know much about the dragon's 9 offspring herself. As an assassin, she only ever followed her master's orders and didn't officially join the organization, even though she crossed paths with its members. She never cared about their names. Her focus was always on her missions and avoiding disappointment in her master's eyes. Yuki admits that her past still haunts her, and that adjusting to her current life feels like living in a warm, fleeting dream. But whenever she looks at Hitoyoshi, she remembers what she truly desires: to be a normal girl. Hitoyoshi, moved by her honesty, tells her he feels the same. After what happened with Grace, he's been yearning to understand her better and help her achieve her goal. Yuki smiles warmly at him, making Hitoyoshi blush. Encouraged by his sincerity, Yuki agrees to share more about herself. She reveals that the reason she likes letting him rest on her lap is because the first time it happened, she felt for the first time that she was genuinely helping someone. She assures him that anytime he has nightmares, her lap will always be there to comfort him. Touched by her words, Hitoyoshi confesses that his dream wasn't actually a nightmare. Instead, it was hopeful. He saw Yuki, feeling the warmth that had been missing in his life since his mother left. This then marks the end of today's anime recap. If you enjoyed the video and want more of it, please support the channel by leaving a like and subscribe. Let's help us reach our current goal of 20,000 subscribers.